guys, and welcome to another episode of Train with Honour TV. First, I want to say a massive thank you for all the engagement that we've had on our YouTube channel. There's been some great engagement following the mental health issue that we had with Connor in the last programme. So massive thank you for that. Remember to keep liking and sharing the podcast. And today we've got a great guest, somebody he's been a player, he's been a manager, he's owned franchises in the States. He's had a bit of everything. And I'm delighted to welcome a former colleague of mine from Atherton LR. It is Mr. Dave Jones. Dave, welcome to the show, mate. I hope you're well. How are you?
Chris, yeah, it's obviously a bit of a time difference and a bit of a temperature difference, but glad to certainly be part of this. So
happy days, mate. It's bad because you've got the sunshine out there, right? And you've got the sunshine and probably the heat, and we've got the sunshine and the bloody cold.
It's right now in Florida. This is the best time of year. We're at 82 degrees each day, no humidity, blue skies. Unfortunately, as the year gets on and we start getting into May, June, and July, it's like 100% humidity, 105 heat index.
Just keep rubbing it in, mate. Just keep rubbing it in.
I'm trying to make everybody feel bad. I'm not. So.
Oh, mate, that is insane. So for the listeners, just want to sort of run through sort of like how you got in. Obviously, we're going to talk about football today. Just talk to the listeners, tell the listeners about sort of how you got into football. Because obviously, you had a pretty good playing career, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started off, obviously, like everybody else, as an apprentice. Obviously, I'm a lot older than, most. I'm, early 50s now. But I started off, I was at Man United in their academy in the days of Dave Sexton, right before Ron Atkinson took over from him, and probably about 7 or 8 years older than like the class of 92 and stuff like that when they first came on board. Got released at 16. Obviously, at that time, I think only Clayton Blackmore was the only one that actually got taken on at that time, or around about that age, in the same academy. And then my dad was in the British Army, and we got posted over to Hong Kong. So I actually went over to Hong Kong 1984, signed as the youngest pro over in Hong Kong, played for a team called Sing Tao that had just got promoted into the Hong Kong First Division, played against players like Tony Morley, who had played for Villa, and Gordon McQueen, who obviously was at United and stuff like that. They were over there, obviously, at the latter part of their career. But I was the youngest pro in Hong Kong, spent 2 years out there, loved it, came back. And then at that time, then went to Stockport County when Danny Bergara was the manager. And then you had Kevin Francis and Brett Angel up front playing for Stockport at that time. And then, just sort of went, a bit of a journeyman. I mean, I'd never reached the heights of what's known as the Premiership, was in and around 94, 95, then actually got the opportunity to go to Chester at the time when Mike Pedgick and Kevin Ratcliffe were there, and Gary Shelton and people like that, and was the youth team manager for a while, until I got the chance to go back out to Hong Kong again. So this time, 8 years later, went back out and was playing for Kitchee, who are obviously now really well known, but at the time they were a brand new team. And then, came back and sort of went into the management side. Actually, 96 was the youngest player manager in what was the Beezer Homes League, which is now the Southern League. I managed, they're known as Rugby United now, but they were VS Rugby. That was the name at the time, the club at the time. And was in the Air Force while managing it. I was at RAF Cottesmore at the time, so I'm sure you know that place.
I know Cottesmore very well.
Yeah, and then 96 Euro Championships, Croatia actually used Cottesmore as their base. So they were playing and training at Cottesmore at the time, and stuff like that. So I got into the coaching bit, done all the journeyman stuff, was at VS Rugby. I had Steve Hunt, who used to play for Coventry and all that, as my assistant manager. And like most things in football, people tend to, stitch you up and like stab you in the back and stuff. I brought a lot of young players who had just been, my plan was to bring a lot of young players who'd just been released from pro clubs like Leicester, Coventry and stuff like that, and then bring them in and use that as a ground for them. A, they were hungry to get back into the game, and B, obviously to be able to develop them into become better players at that level. My first game actually was against Cheltenham Town, who are obviously now top of Division 2, and my first game, and VS Rugby had already been confirmed as being relegated. So I'd gone into like the last 4 or 5 games knowing that it was really just to prepare for the following season. My first game was against Cheltenham. We drew 1-1. And then the very next game was a Midland Floodlit Cup semi-final, got them into the final. And then we played a couple of other games that we ended up, I think I'd like won 2, drawn 2 and lost 1 in like the first 5 games or whatever, but obviously by then it was too late. And then at that point, left the Air Force and moved up to Lee, and basically had established my family when my daughter was born. I was in Lee, and I carried on. Well, actually, I took over at Castleton Gabriels as the manager at Cassie Gabbs in 2000, and used all the contacts I had. So in 2000, you can actually see that I brought people like, let's see, Dean Grey Goose, who was a goalkeeper obviously at Crewe and places like that. I brought Stuart Rimmer, who was obviously Chester's record goal scorer. I brought Clayton Blackmore to play like a couple of games. I brought Lee Martin, who scored like the winning goal in for Man United. So I brought all these players, obviously with the contacts I had, and we got through to the in the FA Vars, and like, you know, I won the first 6 games of the season with Cassie Gabbs and stuff like that. And just as is with all teams at that non-league level, and LR are one of those, it became you know, just financially for these teams, it's tough to survive when you've only got crowds under 50 people, right? Even LR themselves, which we'll get into, even had that as well. So it was just too much traveling from Lee to Rochdale and, you know, all that lot. So I got the job as Lee RMI's reserve team manager. In the first game, we won 7-1, and Steve Waywell was obviously the manager, with people like Steve Jones, Mark Ward, Dave German, you know, just Tony Black, like a really good team that Lee RMI when I was there, got promoted to the conference. We played Fulham in the FA Cup. Kevin Keegan's Fulham.
Bloody hell.
We drew 0-0 there, and then ended up losing 2-0, obviously at Lee's ground at the time, which is now B&Q Car Park, I think, something like that. And so essentially at that point, and then I brought Clayton, obviously, Clayton shared a house with me and Lee, because he'd just gone through a divorce, and so he and I were pretty close. I got him his manager's job at Bangor, brought him into Lee. So I was really heavily involved in, like, you know, obviously the development and relationships and stuff like that, and then got the chance in 2000 to come over here to the States. So essentially, when I came over in 2000, I was playing MLS. I actually was playing a couple of games for New York MetroStars at the time, and then tore my ACL. And then couldn't play, so started my own business doing, call it soccer coaching, obviously over here, but actually coaching teams over here, developing teams, and made a pretty decent business out of it for the first couple of years. My wife at that time was pretty ill, and so I, at the age of 38 in 2006, decided to make the decision to walk into a US Army recruitment office and basically join the US Army at the age of 38. And within 2 weeks of being there, basically was at basic training in the middle of July in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I was English, I was older than everybody else. I'd already gone through obviously a lifetime of experiences. You know, I had drill instructors that were younger than me, and, you know, basically I just laugh at their face when they start screaming. You know, started off in basic training where, you know, I would be brought up in front of 400 new recruits, and, oh, you want to be a US citizen? Great. Well, let's hear you say the Pledge of Allegiance. So, like, I'd have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. If I got any words wrong, they would count how many letters were in the word, times it by 10, and give everybody the push-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then after 2 days of getting that sorted out, they were like, oh, how else can we mess with him? Here we go, Star Spangled Banner. So literally I had to stand up and sing the US national anthem every morning. Ended up being like Whitney at the Super Bowl, and the Rockets ring, like up yours, whatever. So eventually they stopped messing with me and just understood that I actually knew what I was doing and got through basic training. And then, started training as a combat medic and a trauma nurse, which is what I did. So I was in San Antonio for about 11 months. And then after that, got the opportunity then essentially to go to my first unit. And it was like, okay, where are you going to send me? Hawaii, great. Japan, great. No. Fort Hood, Texas, 2 hours up the street. No sooner I report for my unit, and they say, don't even bother unpacking. We leave to go to the desert. We're going to Iraq in 6 weeks. So
look, talk about being stuck in at the bloody deep end. I thought I had it bad after 2 years of being into going to Iraq. But you had it bad big time.
Yeah, literally within 6 weeks. So I'm in Kuwait. We're literally like 3 days away when my unit was deployed. And I get called into the Sergeant Major's office, and here's me thinking, well, what's going on? You never get called into a Sergeant Major's office. And we had a Napoleon complex. Sergeant Major was about 5 foot tall, so that made it worse. He calls me in, hey, Specialist Jones, apparently I've heard, apparently you're some sort of soccer superstar. Like, apparently you've been chosen to coach the Armed Forces women's team at the Military Olympics. So you need to leave. You need to go back to the States, pick the team, and then you go to Hyderabad, and then the Soccer World Cup in Holland. So I came back to the States, picked the team. We went to the Olympics first in Hyderabad, 2007, and then came back to Kuwait and get called into Sergeant Major's office again. Here's me thinking, he's, give me kudos for doing a good job.
Yeah.
Like FU, Specialist Jones, apparently you've been chosen to coach the All-Army men's team. Get out my office, get back to the States, do the coach the All-Army men's team at the Armed Forces tournament, just like the British forces do, right? So you have the Army play against the Air Force and Navy, Marines and stuff like that. Come back again. And then literally again another 3 days. So meanwhile my unit's been downrange for probably 3 months, 4 months, and then he calls me in again for the third time. You MF Specialist Jones, now the Armed Forces women's team are at the Soccer World Cup in Holland. So not only have I been to the Olympics with the Armed Forces team, I've been with the All Army men's team. Now I'm going back with the Armed Forces women's team to Holland, to Ede in Holland, 2008 to coach in the Soccer World Cup. So over the space of 6 months, I've done 3 tournaments, and this is even before I've officially started my real job in the Army. So so that was a good experience. And then spent probably 8 years active duty, something like that, and actually left in 2013, 2014, and then started the business that I have now here in the States. Not necessarily far removed from obviously any soccer or whatever, until I had the opportunity to come back 2018 to come back to the UK, and for the 12 months that I was there, decided that obviously I'd reach out to some of the teams I had an affinity with. So I got in touch with a number of secretaries and spoke in greater detail, obviously, with Atherton LR, who at the time were probably the worst team in the whole Northwest counties. I think they'd won 3 games the whole season. And it wasn't necessarily for that, but I think that because they had a lot of off the field turmoil and a lot of stuff going on, they were going through a transition where no one wanted to touch a job really with a barge pole. So while it was necessary for them to do what they needed to do off the field, obviously results had suffered on the field. I came in probably April 2018. Went to watch the last game that they played against Baker. It just so happened that, I knew Brent obviously from when I'd played and managed Cassie Gabbs before. He'd been there that long at Baker.
30 years, isn't it, Brent, been at Baker?
25 years, which is kudos to him. I mean, then again, when you own the club, you can decide who wants to be a manager too. So, but I've got a lot of time and respect for Brent for everything he's done in the game. And then obviously Dave was with him, Dave Felgate, who obviously I'd had a lot of previous relationship when he was at Chester as the keeper with Ray Newland when I was there in 95, 96. So I knew a lot of people. Baker beat LR 5-0. It was the last game of the season, 2018-19, I believe it was, or 2017-18, whenever it was. And so the team were in turmoil. I mean, obviously there was no quality. They literally were putting players together. I mean, I walked in at the start of the game just to observe, and it was a car, to tell wagging the dog, right? They had the players telling the manager at the time what they were going to do. And I'm sitting in there, obviously before the game just to see what's going on. I think it was 3-0 at halftime. I went in at halftime and I just took over. I said, listen, this ain't the way this is going to go. So at least tried to help them out. They improved a little bit in the second half, 2-0, but I went right in after full time, and I basically said to every single player that was there, grab your bags, get your stuff, because this is the last game that any of you have ever played for LR, because things are going to change. And I literally threw everybody out with a view to starting, obviously, 2018-19 season, with more organisation, more discipline, and obviously with a better quality of player, which is obviously where you and I had come together, because you could see, obviously, pre-season, certainly we had a better quality of player. We had a better infrastructure in place. And while Sean and Andy and all those guys were doing everything they needed to do to get stuff off the field, they really let me do what I needed to do to try and obviously get stuff on the field sorted out by bringing in people like Mark Robinson and, Andy Furnival and people like that as a goalkeeper coach, and, everybody else as an infrastructure, and really try and change the mentality, right? I think non-league soccer is all about mentality. Like, you might not have £1 million in the bank, you might not have the riches at some of the clubs higher up, but if you have a good core mentality, a good core infrastructure at non-league level, it is going to help attract a better kind of player. And then what you go to do is you go to appeal to that player's commitment in, listen, there might not be a lot of money here. And there was no money at LR. I mean, there was absolutely no money. But I got, in the first month or so, more points in the first 7-8 games than they had done in the previous 5 years. At least with that, I mean, I felt that we certainly had a good basis. I mean, when you got someone that, again, going to mentality younger players, right? So you can go from players like Dan Haven, the keeper, who's only 21 years old, but looks about 40, right? And then he's got a lot of experience and everything else. And then you go for the team, you got, Danny. That's right. You got Danny Ashford, 21 years old. You got, people like
Connor Cooper, up front.
Yeah, and then you got other young players too, like Dylan Jeffs and Robbo and people like that. Callum, who's 18 years old, has just been released by Bolton, and then you still, like, the age range that we had. I don't think we had a player 3 or 24, from that first start of the season, and what we certainly wanted to implement. Certainly with Mark's organisation as well. It's just a basic. I mean, when you look, we had probably more pre-season games that pre-season than any club has probably ever had. I think we had 10 or 12 pre-season games, because I really wanted to get through the number of players that we had. I really wanted, not only did we have the Atherton Charity Cup where we had 6 games, we played Salford. We beat Salford 4-1. We played Morecambe's under-23 team. We're winning 2-0 till I changed the team completely at halftime. We drew 2-2. So we did pretty well. Pre-season, and then going in, to the start of the season, we played Nelson first game, and I have all the video highlights up until when I left in October of every single game. And I look back on those and say, like Nelson, we tied 1-1, we took the lead, we hit the bar 3 times, and we could have, like, ended up winning that game 4-5-1. Yeah. And then at the start of the game, you got Nelson's manager going, yeah, like, you guys are lucky, and like, no, it's not luck, like, Then we go into the second game, and lose 6-1 to Lower Breck, who are obviously, one of the best teams in the Northwest Counties anyway. But it was an education for these young lads to play against, good teams. And then we try, draw 2-2 with Darwin with a goal in the very last 10 seconds of that game. And so out of 3 games, we tied 2 and lost 1. And I'm like, okay, this is a wake up for some of these guys to make sure they understand that, it's this level is a lot better than what they're thinking. So for them to turn it round and over the next 6 games, then win, 5 games and draw 1. So we end up with like 15 points. We go out in the FA bars and in extra time, we've got 16-year-old Leighton Clough, give away a penalty in the last 30 seconds and we would have won the bars game. Yeah. It's not their design. Look, there was no... everyone wants to be ambitious. When you go into management, you don't turn around and go, well, I don't want to get promoted. I don't want to win games. Oh. That's not it.
No point. If not.
Right. Exactly. But at the same time, you got to be realistic. When you've got no money and other other clubs are coming in and trying to, poach people like, Connor, who's already, that season scored 18, 19 goals in his first season, Northwest Counties. You got people coming in trying to offer 70, 80 pound a week, which, to some people, is quite a decent amount at that level. But to his credit, he's still there now. And, Connor's one of those people that just wants to play football, enjoy his football. And I think, again, those first 10, 12 games of the season, I think he scored 4 hat-tricks in and proved that he is a quality player at that level. And then you start bringing other players in there too, trying to encourage other players. Now, when players start in other clubs that aren't playing games or whatever, you mentioned LR or clubs of that ilk, right? And then it's like, I'm not interested. But now you start winning games. Now you start getting the word around that actually there's a better infrastructure and things are changing on and off the field. You get to encourage and be able to attract, better players, right? And that's what happens. So, I left only because obviously I was returning back to the States. But again, I'd made the commitment. I was, traveling 3-4 times a week from Prenton near Tranmere's ground all the way to Lee. I wasn't getting paid a single penny. It was all, completely voluntary, and it does tire you out. It does, especially when you've got a young family, like it's a lot of commitment, but I did it. One, to really establish myself back in the game at that level again. And secondly, because I have an affinity with Atherton LR. Obviously, I was at Lee and, I knew the history of the club, and it was a club that I certainly wanted to, give something back to. And, they took a chance, but I feel what I did in that short spell of 3-4 months has now set the foundation for what they have in place now, right? And I think that certainly off the field they've improved, and I think that they've got a good, solid base of a lot of good young players that have now got a season or two's experience under the belt, that I think certainly that they will become better players and for me, better people for it, right? You want to be able to develop players, not just on the field, but off the field to take on good habits too. And I think that's what we did really well.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, one thing that you did do at LR was obviously bring the crowds back in, because I think before we were at LR, it was probably about, I think there was like an old man and his dog would go in, wouldn't they?
Well, Bacup, the last game when I was there was 12 people and 8 of them were from Bacup.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other 3 apart from me were the committee. So, and I think that on average, I think at the start of the season for the 12 games I was there, I think the highest crowd we had, I think, was 145. And I think on average, we were at somewhere like 67, 70, something like that, which was way higher than they'd had all the season before, and maybe the season before that to a certain extent. Yeah. There's a good catchment base, but it's like any team. Like when you're playing crap and you're not having results and you're at the bottom of the table and it's miserable to look at, and there's no direction, there's no infrastructure on or off, and the club isn't being developed as part of the community again, I think that that's what you're going to get. I think, for a club like LR, where they are, with the success that they've had previously, and they've had some good success, have been up in the Unibond League and stuff like that before. They're well known in the non-league circuit. They've got a lot of history, and I think there's more to come. And all I can do is wish everybody well at the club.
No, definitely. Well, there's definitely a lot gone on. Just little things like the match day experience with. Obviously, you bought Mark in as his assistant manager, and obviously his son then I can't remember his name, but his son then came involved and looked after the media element. So straight away,
yeah, Morgan did a fantastic job. Social media, the program as well, which I had a hand in helping, wanting to develop the aftermatch, video. Conversations and really brought the highlight of Twitter and social media back up to the level that it should be. And I think he's left and passed that on to somebody else. And again, it's just kudos to people like Mark and Morgan. And, you can't, again, you have to have a committee of, off the field committed volunteers in any non-league club to make it, the base and have that base to be successful too. And I definitely feel that LR have that, and they're certainly COVID's played a part in a lot of stuff with everybody, especially essentially writing off the last two seasons since I've been there, right? But I think there's more to come from them for sure.
No, definitely. Fingers crossed that they can get back to former glories and ride up the thing. I'm just a bit conscious of time because I know you've got quite a lot going on. It's work at the moment. So
phones going off on silent and everything else. So
to be in a business and own an entrepreneur, right? And obviously,
hey, listen, you can make your own decisions, but you live and die by those too, right? So you have to do everything. So
100%. And on that one, Dave, just to sort of wrap it up, for the listeners watching, what are your non-negotiables for achieving success and for progressing in life?
In life or in football, I think they probably mirror each other, I think, really, to be honest. I think certainly, I play a major part over in the States, actually mentoring fellow veteran entrepreneurs that are looking to start in business and stuff, because every mistake, I still make them every day like everybody else does in business. But certainly for me, you've got to be driven, you've got to be determined, and you've got to be committed. I think if you can question any of those capabilities, or qualities with you yourself, then you're never going to make it as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, or, in sport, in professional sport. It's okay. It's all about wanting to be part of that team element. But it comes down to, quite honestly, you as an individual and your own belief, determination, and commitment in wanting to be that. I was never the best player. But I just knew where the goal was, right? So whatever team I was with, I would score, right? And it wasn't that but it took hard work. It wasn't just I turned up one day, but I've seen players much better than me never get anywhere in the game. So there is an element of luck as well. And that goes for the same. Now, just to finish up, the biggest vein I have right now, looking at the management or coaching level, is there are tremendously talented coaches at a lower level that are never given the opportunity because it's the same merry-go-round of the same coaches. And for me, if you have consistent failures in life or in sport, why are you still being given opportunities to continue to fail, right? So you could be at a club, 5, 6 different clubs and never do anything with them. But guess what? Your name's popping up again as a manager, at a different club at a different level. And it's what bullshit are you spinning to whoever's owning the club to allow you to get the opportunities to fail again, at a much more spectacular level? That for me is the most frustrating thing. I think if teams took a chance, more of a chance, and we're talking, from League One, League Two, down to, National League, North and South, and so on, right? Those clubs, and then getting into Northwest counties as well. I think the expectations have got to be managed a little bit better. Excuse me. I think the expectations have got to be managed by people in charge of these clubs and give people a chance. There are people out there. Yeah, is it a calculated risk? Absolutely. But it's the same calculated risk as it is bringing someone in who's been a constant failure their whole life in that coaching element too. It's the same risk.
Well, you look at the Cowley brothers, don't you? You know, you look at what they did at Lincoln City, and then obviously they went off to, I think it was Huddersfield. And then I think they've just taken.
And now they're back in Portsmouth.
Yeah. And you know, and that's testament to the hard grafting work they do. And I mean, Richie Welling's another example. He just
got fired at Salford after winning a cup. So
I don't get that. You know, I really didn't get that.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on behind closed doors that no one will ever know, right? But ultimately, just these people in charge of clubs obviously have their own agenda. They'll make their own decisions based on whatever that agenda is. And it may have nothing to do with what's going on the field or anything to do. It may be a personality clash. Yeah. It may just be a change of direction based on the business model. But that mirrors what you do in life too, right? So as an entrepreneur, pretty successful one based on the business I have, you're always constantly having to adjust and change direction. You may have a particular focus, you may have a particular direction that you want to go in, but if you're so laser focused in doing that, sometimes you have to take the blinkers off and try and go in a different direction. And that's what these chairmen, owners of clubs have to do. It's okay being focused on success, got it, but take the blinkers off and realize that there may be another way to get to that same direction, destination that you want to go, right? And I think that's probably the couple of main things that I'd probably put forward. Whether that holds any ground, hey, who's this bold?
Hey, time will tell, right? Time will tell.
Who's he? What does he know? I don't know shit. Don't take any notice of me. That's fine, right? But
well, one day it might happen. But Dave, it's been absolutely fantastic to catch up. It's great to hear your story, and you know, hopefully we can get you back on in a future episode and, you know, elaborate a little bit more on a few other elements. Obviously, there's so many elements to, you know, what you're doing now in your transition from playing, managing to obviously being an entrepreneur, and it'll be great to sort of catch up on that. But in the meantime, thanks very much for your time. And, you know, for the guys that want to reach out to you, where's the best place to go?
So they can obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. We have a website, www.americanallergyservices.org. Doesn't necessarily have to be related, obviously, to, you know, the work field. Obviously, I'm still very much involved, you know, on the soccer side over here. I'm a consultant for a lot of CONCACAF nations and stuff in scouting players over here in South Florida and stuff like that. You know, and heavily involved still involved in the game where time permits, but working 80, 90 hours a week and totally committed to this. Sometimes it's difficult to do that, but, you know, the love of the game's never going to change for me. You know, ultimately, someone came back and said, hey, we got, you know, a national team to coach or whatever. Why don't you consider it? You know, again, there'd always be that second of thought and second of doubt. Let me give everything up just to go back and give it a chance or whatever. My wife would kill me, but I'd be like, yeah, it'd be all right. It'd be okay. So,
mate,
I'll lose the game. So
as long as you're enjoying what you're doing and you get what you want and you get what makes you happy, that's the most important. The most important thing. But
listen, Chris, I appreciate it.
Pleasure, buddy.
No problem.
And also speak.
Okay. Hey, listen. It's great seeing and talking to you again. Good luck with everything as well yourself. And like I said, you know, let's revisit this in the future, and hopefully we can catch up again.
Yeah, 100%. Well, have a great rest of the day, and I'll catch up soon.
All right, buddy. Yeah, some of us have got lunch now, and then we'll go head to the beach, to the bar, and then we'll be all right.
Yeah. Cheers, mate.